Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading Plato's Phaedo in order to understand what exactly philosophy is and how we can benefit from it ourselves. That is what is most important. How do we benefit from philosophy? Last time we did a fantastic recap and we saw that there is there are many ways of defining what philosophy is. We talked about following the logos, and we saw in the text Socrates was watching the logos that unfolded, which is curious because he's the one talking, or is he? So following the logos is what we do in philosophy. Of course, that means we have to learn what the logos is because it's not something we're taught. It's a Greek word, but that's been our quest all the way through this channel, all the way through these podcasts to figure out what exactly the logos is. And we've identified that it's to do with certain key terms that we can call selfers. It's the self logos, which is opens in a bunch of puzzles. Oh, if it's the self logos, is that why it read in the text that Socrates was watching the logos from self? Interesting. Because it's the self logos? If it's the self logos, is it something that we have ourselves that we're here to recover or discover? Also, the word self in the Greek means honorific. It actually has 3 levels of meaning. The particular of the sentence, the physical thing you're talking about, the honorific of something, the highest excellence of it, and finally, the ultimate term in philosophy is the one self, or the good self. The first and final cause. And our quest, according to the oracle at Delphi, according to the philosophers, according to the ancient Greek tradition, is to know thyself. We are here to know the self, the highest self. So, when we say self-logos, we're talking about all 3 maybe. We can use it ourselves in the particulars in how we discuss, how we relate to ourselves and others, how we function, how we think, how we reflect. There's the honorific. We can recognize, oh, this self-logos isn't the same thing as opinion or beliefs. It is honorific. It has an existence in the realm of being. This is essential for philosophy. It's about the realm of being. It's not about the physical world. You start in the physical world until you learn to ask questions by being a philomathesis or a lover of learning. You're not chasing riches. You're not chasing fame. Instead, it's the third part of the soul, the highest part of the soul that you're interested in, learning. When you get into learning, you'll be led to eventually, if you approach it with excellence, ask the question, hang on a second, what is the nature of these things I'm learning about? What is equality itself? What is sameness? What is excellence? What is beauty? That's the realm of being, where these things that we normally see as adjectives, a beautiful thing, has its existence in a noun, allowing us to have its reflection in beautiful things. So in that sense, self-logos must have an existence there too. It is eternal and pure and deathless and the paradigm, the model for creation. All of these words that we are picking up from the text to describe the realm of being. We are gathering these certain words, these selfer terms that have a existence in being. So therefore, we're picking up the self-logos, certain specific terms that refer to being, the self-logos. What is primary, what is necessary for there to be a physical world. We call that metaphysics. So we're learning about the self-logos, that's the big one. And Socrates is watching the logos from self. So one way of defining philosophy is following the logos. Because we don't just learn it, we live it. So that brings in the virtues, the application of what we're learning. These two ideas, definition and demonstration. You define it, you understand it, and you demonstrate it, you live it. You learn about the logos, but you follow the logos by applying it in your experience. And if you're doing it at all times, that's the virtues. You're becoming a virtuous person. Socrates helped us see that by pointing out, by the way, even if you are what we would normally call virtuous, you are normally even-tempered, you're not lecherous or wildly following your desires, but you're not following the logos with that even-temperedness, then you're actually doing something called vice. You're mastering some of your pleasures in order to be mastered by the others. You're just going to get better at that other pleasure you're seeking. Better at doing something which will harm your soul. That's vice. So it's important that we learn definition and demonstrate the virtues, because that makes us a virtuous person. Also, there's something special that we're seeking when we reach the object of our learning, the goal of our learning, when we reach truth, that if we bring the virtues with us, we're able to upgrade those virtues in what Socrates is calling the spiritual or mystical experience, and initiation, thumbs up, something we're after called phronesis, the ultimate virtue that we trade the other virtues in for. So what is philosophy? Well, you could say following the logos. Another way of defining what philosophy is, and especially because when we do this, we're not just learning what it is, we're learning what it isn't, so we can recognize the problems, recognize the cons, recognize what philosophy isn't. If philosophy is the most important thing that we can do as human beings, we also have to recognize how it's been corrupted, how con artists use it, how people who might not be con artists but just are deluded or ignorant, or grow up in a culture where they taught philosophy was something else. You can do this, you try it yourself. Go out in the street, ask 10 people what they think philosophy is. I guarantee you all 10 of them will not talk about what philosophy actually is. Because we have to reawaken philosophy. That's the name of the channel, Awakening Philosophy. Maybe we could have called it Reawakening Philosophy, because Socrates at least had it back then. His friends, of course, were were struggling, so they said, when you go, how will we learn about being and the meaning of life and destiny if you go? So they didn't have confidence in themselves. But to this day, well, we had it back then, but to this day we've gone on a tangent. The counterattack. The Latin tradition and the church and the authoritarians that came in at around 530 AD, killed the philosophers, burnt down the libraries, banned philosophy, said you have to have belief in what we tell you. You can't read it for yourself. You can't have understanding. So the idea of what causes our problems, beliefs, what solves us problems, understanding, which makes sense. If you have false beliefs, that is the cause of problems. But if you understand something, you can solve problems. Or at the level of belief, you're a kind of a slave to whoever's giving you the belief. So that doesn't help. They flipped it. Actually, understanding is bad. Direct experience is bad. You just have faith. They flipped it. They conned us. They lied to us. They bullshitted us. The thing that's the cause of problems is now marketed as the good, the virtue. To believe somebody else without understanding. In fact, the more absurd the belief, the better, because it proves you have faith. Oh, that makes you a good person. Bullshit. It's the opposite. They flipped it on us. You couldn't have the books. You couldn't read for yourself. You couldn't exercise. You couldn't take on the quest. Notice this whole podcast is about reading for ourselves, reading together. It's an activity.
You're a wizard, Harry.
It's a game. Yes, boo if we can't read the text. Thumbs up if we can. Because we have to solve the puzzle. You play the game. It's the hero's quest. And by taking away the material that we apply ourselves to, banning the game, they brought in the Dark Ages and they've kept us in ignorance. And we're suffering the effects even today of that. Take away what we need to do to reach our destiny and solve problems. We live in a world full of genocide and war and exploitation and all of the problems that happen right now. We can turn it around. We can pick up the book and we can read it. Why? Because that allows us to move from ignorance and believing others, who are themselves ignorant, by the way, to develop our own understanding and then confirm that understanding in our experience, knowledge, understanding that's directed specifically to being that can awaken nous, knowledge. We can do it now. And this is what this whole channel has been about. We can play the game. So we need the text to be reading, and we try and read it without interpretation. So we need a text with the Greek and with an accurate translation. Thankfully, in the last 10, 20 years, we have the One Balboa translations, which allows us to play the game again. We can recover. We can get back on track. That's what it means to be human, by the way. It's not about being perfect. It's about recovering, getting back up, getting back on track, and learning why did we have a counterattack to truth? How can we learn from it so it doesn't happen, so we don't make the same mistakes again? Human history is full of the exact same mistakes being made over and over again because we lack what we need to learn. That's what we're doing here. Learning what it means to learn, learning what it means to reflect, learning what it means to grow, to change our mind. That's what we're doing here. And so, what does that involve? Last time we recognized there were 3 key elements. The self-logos. Reading a text, down here, like we're reading in the Phaedo, that has the key terms, that is written in a kind of a puzzle way, but is written with certain key terms. We can recognize different classes of those key terms, specifically the selfers, self-beauty, self-justice. There's a bunch of good ones. So the material, the information, the key terms. But we realize that they exist within a structure. It's not just bunch of spaghetti thrown against the wall. There's an order to it. There's a hierarchical structured order reflected, or that these terms function in. That is the order that the universe unfolds in, but not just the universe, but our psychic development. In fact, all understandable hierarchically ordered systems in the universe follow the same order. So we can give that the word paradigm. Whether you're learning music or math or biology, you can see it's the same structure, which is important. If you go to school currently and you don't have true philosophy, they just throw a whole bunch of stupid opinions at you. Kant's opinions, Hegel's opinions. And they just say, well, what do you do with it? I don't know. Pick the ones you like. Because we don't have a structure to hang these opinions on. Which are the right ones? How do we know? Without the model of what's true, we can't recognize where it's false. It would be like studying to become a doctor, and here are all these different illnesses. What do I do with them? You have to first learn about the ideal human body so you can recognize, this cancer isn't normal. Cancer isn't good because I have the paradigm of the healthy body and I can recognize that cancer is a deviation from it. So it's actually an illness. I can do that with all of the illnesses. In fact, now that I have the model of the healthy body, you can tell me about cancer, you can tell me about tuberculosis, you can tell me about a broken arm, and I'll be able to put it somewhere, put it against the model of the healthy body. I've got a coat hanger to hang all of these bits of information on. We don't get this with philosophy. Why? because they're not in real philosophy. That's impolite to say because we're taught, oh, just let everybody have their ignorance. Don't make them feel bad about being wrong. It's not about feeling bad. It's about becoming excited about learning something new. Because I bet you the majority of philosophy students or even psychology students would love to have the paradigm, to love to realize, oh, this is why it's not making sense. This is why it's kind of dull or dry or it's just reading all these books for no reason. I guarantee 9 out of 10 philosophy or psychology students will feel this way because it's normal. Anything you do, whether it's medicine or learning how to fix a car, you need to know what a well-working car is first. And then you can diagnose the deviations. So everybody who's a human being has some kind of deviation from the ideal as part of the being a human being, because we're here to purify those imperfections and perfect ourselves towards mastering and moving up that model of personal development. Purification and perfection, solving problems and perfecting our understanding. But how can you recognize it without the model? So we are introducing the model. Socrates is. Well, the self is introducing the model to us through the logos, through Socrates, and through this text written by Plato, or transcribed. I like to think that these conversations actually took place. And thankfully we have a good account of them. Thumbs up. So we're learning the paradigm. So then when we go back to school, it's like, oh, here's Kant's opinion. Whoa. First, let's learn the truth. Then we can realize, oh, Kant had this problem with knowledge. He said that knowledge wasn't knowable. And why? Because God, he had some religious influence. Hegel had some problem. Nietzsche had some problem because they're human beings. Hey, the fact that they don't agree on anything, well, they all have disagreements, tell you that they all are not right. So how do we notice in what parts are they right, what parts are they not right? It's a higgledy-piggledy. Psychotherapy and psychology is the same right now. It's in its early days, doesn't have a model. It's called eclectic. Every different psychologist picks and chooses the things that he likes, which of course will suit his personal level of ignorance and understanding. The two, it will reflect his prejudices or pathologos and whatever level of learning of the self-logos he's on, but it won't be the ideal. Anybody who's seen a counselor or a psychotherapist knows this. They all know that. Everybody knows this. Everyone has their own different opinions, and it's usually a bunch of advice, and sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of hit and miss. It's not real. Yeah, then we give a thumbs down for that. People get disillusioned. But if there is a model, if there is an understandable hierarchical order in the universe, and we know that there is in music, in math, in biology, and also in spirituality and psychic development, there are traditions that have, like, for example, the 10 ox herding pictures recognize their stages of enlightenment. They lack the logos, of course, but they can recognize the states of mind. Then wouldn't it be rational to understand the order in the system? Of course it is. So we are becoming rational. So here's another answer to what philosophy is: becoming rational. And if all humans have the shadow, their problem logos, and some level of development that they are here to climb up the actual paradigm of spiritual and personal development, then we're here to perfect ourselves to reach our destiny, purify ourselves from the problems or ignorance or false beliefs that cause our problems, leading us to our tragic fate. then you can say, well, I lost my train of thought. If there is such a paradigm that we're here to do to purify and perfect ourselves through, then it would be only rational to learn the game rules. So what's philosophy? Learning the game rules, so you can play it well. Live a good life. Be a good person. For this life and in the next. So we can say, what's philosophy? Understanding and living the meaning of life. Fulfilling our purpose. And if this is the rational thing to do, just like the rational thing in being a doctor is to learn the model of the healthy body, the rational thing in being a mechanic is to learn the model of the car, then you could say, what's philosophy? Becoming rational. So we've got a few really nice definitions now in our back pockets that we can take with us. What is it? Following the logos. What is it? Entering the human race. Because if this is what humans are here for, and we recognize that our problems are caused by not doing this, list them, they all have the same cause, then we're entering the true human race. We're doing what we're here to do. Purify and perfect ourselves, allowing us to evolve. Care, use our intelligence to care and nurture and protect the planet. And then end human beings. And then not only move from sickness to health in the planet and people, but from health to excellence. Create the conditions where we're free to do philosophy, to fulfill our purpose, to understand our purpose within all intelligent systems. Why do we have humanity? Why is humanity worth saving? Where are we going when we die? What's the significance of our journey here? So this is the evolution. So we can enter the human race. So what's philosophy? Entering the human race. So we got a bunch. Learning the game rules, being rational, entering the human race, following the logos. So all of these require there to be a understandable model, paradigm that applies not just to music and math and flowers, but also to psychic development. Why would it miss that? It would be absurd. And of course, we don't have to guess why. We can see that it does exist because we are going through it. We're not just understanding it or defining it, but we are demonstrating it ourselves. So we recognize definition and demonstration are the first two steps in the 4 steps of the dialectic. Definition, demonstration, division, and synthesis analysis. We are defining and demonstrating philosophy. So what is that structure? What is that structure, that the coat hanger that we can hang our books, our readings of? Oh, okay, I'm going to read Kant's. Okay, this is Kant's level of vision. Kant's level of understanding, definition, level of vision, demonstration. Oh, by the way, here's his problems. Didn't think this, didn't relate to this, had this particular false belief. We can trace the causes. This is important to do because not only if he was still around, he could reflect and learn himself, but we can understand what were the conditions for these certain kinds of false beliefs to be taught to babies. We learn. We learn from teachers who like to claim to be knowers. Everyone wants to be the knower. Everyone wants to be wise. But how many people are? So we inherit false beliefs through culture, through traditions, through families. But we can look at, this was the cause of Kant's false belief. Of course, we can't do much about his parents, but we can look at the culture and the society and we can make changes. Just like right now, there's a cost of living crisis. where the people who own all the houses and people who own all the stuff, a small group of people, realize, oh, they can just charge whatever they want and just let people suffer and die, and because they can make profits. That's happening. It's terrible. And the politicians don't give a shit because they're getting paid. They're bought and paid for. So what do? If we understand the cause of that, we can look at the conditions that created that. The fact that we don't have a paradigm for judging what makes you qualified as a politician. If you're a smooth talker, if you're a grifter, you can get in power, and then you'll just be paid off. That is a condition lacking a paradigm, lacking a model for judgment, for qualification. You don't let doctors just con their way in. And then they don't know how to set laws, and so they set these laws and they create capitalism. There's another condition under capitalism. There's no life imperative. There's no principle that says we should be serving life. It's just how to make short-term personal profit for the smallest amount of people at the expense of the planet and the resources and the human suffering. That's the principle of capitalism. So it's a, in principle, an unjust, freaking terrible system. And if we understand that, we can address the cause. Oh, okay, if you have this system where just let people who own the stuff exploit the others, what are they going to do? Exploit the others. So there's your cause of the cost of living crisis, capitalism, and the cause of capitalism, politicians who don't have an understanding of causes. So what is this paradigm that can be applied anywhere? In our reading, in our solving problems, and in our personal development, because it might take a while for the rest of the world to awaken to philosophy, but we can ourselves. In this community, on this channel, in this Discord, in this YouTube channel, we can use it for our own development because we have a soul. We are here for however long we're here, and we are on a journey that extends beyond. That's what we're reading in the Phaedo. It's a logical necessity, and there's a beauty to the reasoning that shows that it must be that we are in a cyclical process of incarnation. And there's a significance to our activity here. We can benefit from our learning, and there's a learning that extends beyond our lifetime into the kind of incarnation that we have. And there is a better and worse kind of incarnation. You can be a bee, or a donkey, or a wolf, or a hawk. Or you can go to a higher place with better men who have completed their work here, and better gods and better masters, and engage in the better, in philosophy better. The real game. Understanding what's true. And experiencing the truth. Definition and demonstration. It's always there because it's the dialectic, it's the structure, it's the paradigm. So what's philosophy? Learning the paradigm. Learning the archetypal universal paradigm that we need in order to follow the logos, in order to be rational, in order to play the game, in order to join the human race. So we need two now, the self-logos and the dialectic. But when you have two, look for a third. That's a nice principle in philosophy, because triads are all the way through philosophy and our reality. So what is it directed towards? Oh, and so what's philosophy? Yeah, learning the paradigm. What's it directed towards? What's our attention on? Are we doing philosophy by looking for the key terms, the logos, and the paradigm or structure of tree frogs? Of how to build cars? Of how to eat jelly beans? No, specifically it's on reality. Not the appearance of reality with this physical world that, you know, it feels real because we can knock it and it makes a noise. We can bump our head on it. It can cause us pleasure and pain. So it has a kind of reality that we can perceive through our senses. But there are other cognitive functions or senses that can perceive the higher realm. We talked about nous. We talked about separating the soul from the body. We talked about the eye of the soul, ousia, that can join with self-ousia, which is the hypothesis of all of those self-er terms in being, beauty itself, justice itself. So what's common? They're all in being. It's all about reality. What has Socrates been saying? Slay queen, not queen, king. Slay philosopher king. There you go. What has Socrates been slaying and saying that philosophers seek? Truth and phronesis. And balloons. And what's truth? Being. Knowing the being. Reality. So all of these self-er terms can describe being. So we can add them to our dialectic, because we're not just defining these terms, we have to demonstrate them. We have to actually create our own dialectics. So we've got a lovely list of self-logos terms that we can put into our dialectic about being. Truth, reality, the object of knowledge, the hyparxis, self-ousia. The goal of philosophy, the goal of all people, the goal of all lovers, because it's the only thing you could, it's the highest beauty, and it's the only thing you can completely join with. And it's the only thing you can join with forever. So all of those things we desire when we love something, you can only get it there. So it's the purpose of all human desires. But it's also the purpose of all human beings with intelligence who want to know. And oh, by the way, because we've been developing triads, we can recognize understanding as a part of the soul, desiring as a part of the soul. So if we desire ultimate union with that which is good and beautiful, you could say, well, it's the object of our desire. If it's the object of knowledge, where we can confirm our understanding, then it's not only the desiring part of our soul that seeks it, but the reasoning part of our soul. But because we recognize the paradigm of the soul, we can recognize, oh, there's one more part. There's the inward desiring, there's the reasoning, and there's the outward moving or the honor-seeking part of our soul. And we could deduce or solve the puzzle because we're doing it ourselves, because we're defining and demonstrating. We can recognize, oh, there's one more part we can solve. There's a puzzle there. There's a question to be answered. What would the ultimate goal of, if the ultimate goal of reasoning and desiring is this union with being, as we're saying, union with the pure and uniform, then could this be the most honorable thing? Could this be the thing we seek in all activities? Could this be the thing that would provide us with what we seek through fame? Let's think about this. What do we want from fame? We want to be liked, be well known, have a sense of immortality through our fame. Well, we read that the nature of being is eternal and immortal. By the way, is it honorable if it's untrue? Do you want to win the football game by cheating? Or is it more honorable and get more fame and be well liked by everyone if you do it because in a true way, in a virtuous way? So would the object of virtue lead you to being? How about this? Truth. If it's truth, there you go. It's truth, it's reality. So if our outward moving part of the soul seeks truth, the honor of doing something virtuous and true, and the immortality that arises from that through fame, then the true object of fame, or fame is a shadow of our true object of outward moving, virtuous and true reality. So the realm of being is not just the hyparxis of all of the self-er terms, it's the hyparxis of all of the goals of the parts of the soul, all three of them. What's the soul? You want sandwiches, inward desiring. You want to act in the world. You want to do things virtuously and true and be well respected for it. And fame is the immortal good respect for being virtuous and true, for your good activities. And you want to understand. Or know as well, confirm your understanding and knowing. So it's the object of knowing, it's the object of truth, immortal truth. And it's the object of desire, because it's the good and the beautiful, the immortal eternal connection with that, as we seek with beautiful things. Then it's all three parts of the soul seek the same object. So all human beings, whatever they're more interested in, seeks the same goal. And if a philosopher is truly unified, the virtue of temperance, then they can recognize this. So of course you want being. Of course you want to do philosophy at all times. Because anything else, you're not going to get what you really want. You're not going to get true immortal fame and truth. You're not going to get true eternal connection with the good and beautiful, desire. You're not going to understand things if you're a lover of learning, unless you're in being. So of course we want to do philosophy at all times. Everything else is a shadow. It's like a kind of activity that moves you in the other direction from your goal. So it makes sense to do philosophy at all times, as Socrates is saying we should do. And he said, by the way, when you realize this, don't self-imprison. Don't just get into your physical pleasures and physical senses for a while, because you're going to just bring your soul down. Clip your wings. You'll nail the soul to the body, and then your incarnation is going to be bad, and you have to go through it all again. Maybe even worse next time. But when we realize this, we can realize, oh yeah, we have a single purpose. By the way, that helps us to recognize there is a single unified purpose that all parts of the soul seek. Therefore, if all parts of the soul seek it and all souls therefore seek it, then we can say it's the destiny, it's a single destiny, and a destiny of all men, the destiny of man. So another way of saying what philosophy is, it's the destiny of man. Why? Because it's directed towards being. So I've got a lot of ways of talking about what philosophy is in our back pockets now, in our inventory. We've leveled up really well on our journey. What are they? Well, look at it as three. Self-logos term, following the logos. Being rational. Also the structural paradigm, entering the human race, learning the game rules, following the universal paradigm, but also directed towards being, not tree frogs or jelly beans. Therefore, the destiny of man. So there's our triad. Self-logos terms, dialectic structure, directed towards being. This is what we're discovering about philosophy. By the way, all three of those words define dianoia, which is not an English word, but we're going to make it an English word. I've decided it's English now. It's like croissant. That's not originally English, but we have it in English now. Schadenfreude, a German word that's now an English word. Well, dianoia is now an English word. And it's needed because you could say, well, dianoia really sums it up. It encapsulates all three of those. And within those three are all of our lists, following the logos, being rational, playing the game, the actual hero's journey, the destiny of man. All of those things are within those three, and those three are defining dianoia. But not only that, dianoia helps us to distinguish what philosophy isn't. Terms that aren't the self-logos terms. Collecting terms like Kant and Hegel. Existentialism and nihilism and empiricism, all these sorts of things, as your material. Not having a paradigm. Everything is just opinions and who cares? Just give the right answers on the test and profess the faith and you'll call yourself a philosopher. Who cares? Anyone can call themselves a philosopher. Any scammer can. Because there's no paradigm. Just pick what you want. And finally, not directed towards being. One of the things these modern or European from the Latin tradition that is a counterattack to this, to Socrates, to the truth, to the Greek tradition, is they don't have the word the, which means they can't go from adjectives, a beautiful thing, a equal stick, to the, which means they're stuck in the physical world. In fact, you can use the dialectic structure to recognize all of the different kinds of rejections of being. It doesn't exist. Maybe it exists, but it's not knowable. Maybe it exists and it's knowable, but just not to human beings, only to God. Not only is there no realm of being, there's not even us really. It's all an illusion. There are many different ways of rejecting being, but having the actual dialectic structure allows you to class them, recognize them, hang them on something. Just like having the model of the human body allows you to reckon, oh, that's a broken arm, that's a broken toe, that's a broken knee. I can see it all. Same thing with fixing a car. That's a broken carburetor. That's a broken exhaust. There you go. There's 2 car words. So it's not the self-logos, it lacks the dialectic paradigm structure, and it is not directed towards being. That opinion, we call that opinion, by the way, in philosophy. They might call it philosophical understanding. So we can define what philosophy is, dianoia, from what it isn't. Non-dianoia, opinion. In fact, philodoxia is the term Socrates used, lover of opinion. And that's significant because only opinions are the realm of the physical world. That's significant because in the text we just read, Socrates point out that because this is one of the parts, reading the text allows you to play this game because we have the actual words. He points out that, let's bring it up. The true and the divine is the beholding being, which is unopinable. Here's our following the logos here. Here's our do it always so you don't self-imprison yourself. Follow the logos, you'll get a sense of calm. It'll affect your state of mind if you demonstrate it. So defining the logos and following it, and you'll behold that which is unopinable. It's our destiny, but also we will escape from human ills. So we escape our fate and find our destiny. This is what we read last time. 84a in the text. Page 46 in this translation, which you can find a link to below. So, what is philosophy? Dianoia. What's that? Oh, self-logos, dialectic, directed towards being. What isn't philosophy? Oh, opinions. Lacking those 3 things. So that's the way philosophy is marketed. It's very, very important that we wake up and realize this. And not take it personally and try and, well, I have a degree and I've been teaching for 25 years. And no, bullshit. Come on, it's either true or it's not. And if it's not true, it will have an implication. Definition, demonstration. It will demonstrate itself. It will have negative consequences. There's a reason why hypocrisy is bad. There's a reason why people shouldn't be entitled to their harmful, ignorant opinions, because they act on it. It demonstrates itself. This idea, just let tyrants be tyrants. Who cares? There's no problems that come from people having fundamentally wrong, harmful prejudices. Really? Of course there is. People act on them. They vote according to them. That's why propaganda is a problem. If you lie to people, you can get them to act against their own interests. against their own best interests, and dictatorships. You get a whole culture around that. It's conservatism. What's conservatism? It's not really conservatism at all. We talked about this. It's blind allegiance to the past, our prejudices or false beliefs, instead of progressing. You can have a whole culture. There are towns like, oh, we are defined by being conservative. What's that mean? I like all my prejudices. Really? What about learning? Screw learning. I'm always right, and I always have been, and whoever taught me, I'm not going to ask questions about them. I'm just going to assume they knew everything too. And the book that they apparently looked at, I'm going to not even look at that myself. Ignorance. Conservatism is ignorance, by definition. But there was a historical, evolutionary necessity for it to protect ourselves before we were able to access the logos or participate or share in the logos through intelligence. Kept us safe inside the cave good. So you notice that right wing or fascism or conservatism are defined by hating other groups, fearing understanding. Socrates points this out. This self-imprisonment, we will cling to the body, and philosophy encourages in us and tries to free us and reveals and persuades, whereas holding on to where you start with your senses, trains you to be accustomed to, oh yes, you'll think nothing else is true other than the physical, and you'll be accustomed to hate and fear and avoid philosophy and that which is knowable. So famously, right-wingers and fascists and conservatives don't like thinking. They're taught, even though they think themselves, even though thinking is something they do anyway, because they hate and fear and avoid it, or this kind of well-ordered thinking. Some will say, oh, I don't like thinkers, but some will go, oh no, I think, but I'm only going to think in a way that will justify my prejudices. Likewise, there's no left wing, because progressives, if this dianoia is what's needed to progress, to purify our problems and perfect our understanding, then the only real political party should be the Logos Party, the dianoia party. So we need philodianoia, lover of understanding. That's the new political party. That's the only rational party. Just like saying, well, I'm a doctor who believes that leeches save people. We don't allow that. No. There's a model, there's a paradigm for sickness and health. You can't just use your No, but in the past we thought leeches. But isn't that make America great again? Hold on to our prejudices from the past? It might be comfortable and familiar if you grew up in a culture that, or a family that believed leeches cured illnesses. It doesn't matter. It's not virtuous to hold on to what is familiar and comfortable and wrong or false or harmful. That's vice. We go to school to let go of that. We go to, what's the words here in the text? To be persuaded and encouraged and freed from it by revealing to us the truth. That's learning. And those who try and convince you that the old is good are usually almost always conning you. They usually don't believe it themselves, but they realize they can play to what's comfortable and familiar, especially if they've created a world of fear and anxiety. Just like when you're anxious, you might watch an old TV show you've already seen, gives you a sense of comfort and familiarity. They can play to that, create a world of fear, and then say, oh, by the way, prejudices, right? The past was better, right? Yeah, well, it's only better because of the way, the terribleness you've acted upon the world now. By the way, they're lying, it's a scam. So we can recognize, because they're passing laws that can increase their personal profits and power and allow them to act out their fascism, their problems in a greater and greater way. Act out their vice in a greater and greater way. So understanding philosophy, understanding dianoia, the self-logos terms, the dialectic structure directed towards truth of being, giving us the paradigm, that's dianoia, can help us recognize the opposite of those 3 or 4 things. To recognize scammers, con artists, fascists. And of course, what is dianoia should be the model for the good party, the progressive or learning or making things better party. Of course, even fascists claim to be making things better. So really, if we all want to make things better, then there should just be one party, just like there's one way of fixing a car. The dianoia party, philodianoia is what we need. Okay, that's politically, so we've solved the political problems, yay. Of course, there is an issue of how do you reveal it? How do you navigate the counterattack? How do you create the conditions, the safe, encouraging, revealing, persuasive conditions so that we can challenge what is false, we can evolve. Some people don't want to change their mind. How do we address those? So our human problem is not just reawakening dianoia philosophy, but demonstrating it. Not just defining it, demonstrating it. It's always definition and demonstration. How do we demonstrate it? How do we persuade? Socrates said, by the way, I'm going to, all the way back at page 7. Let's go back. Page 7, I am going to examine, definition, and mythologize, demonstrate. That place, being. So he recognized, yeah, you've got to not just know it, but find a way of communicating it to those who are unfamiliar with it. Examination and mythologizing, definition and demonstration. About being. About that place that we think the self is. So, that's our standard, whether we're talking to conservatives or progressives, however form that takes. Are you following the logos? Where are you at with the logos, with dianoia? And where are you stuck? What's preventing you from doing dianoia? That's the 2 questions you can ask, really, of a human being. Where are you at within dianoia, and where are you stuck? What's the shadow of dianoia that you have a blind allegiance to that's actually against your own interests? And the thing about right-wing propaganda is networks and stuff, we can show how easily people can be convinced to act against their own interests because they can just lie. So one of the laws we need to pass is you can't lie. You can't knowingly lie on television because you can just manipulate people to get stuck more. We don't want people to be stuck. So where are you stuck? Where are you thinking you're doing something good, but you've been conned by your evolution, a solution that no longer works, in evolutionary speaking, by your culture, by your religion, by your family, by the time period we're at? Where have you been conned? Where is the con of dianoia that you're fiercely loyal to? Because you should be fiercely loyal to truth, to actual dianoia. Where are you at? Where are you stuck? The 2 questions you can ask. You know, maybe add a third. Where are your myths? How are you mythologizing your dialectics? Let's have a look at them. Dialectic could be where you're at, where you're stuck, or your dreams. Because dreams give you information of both, by the way. So, what is philosophy? Dianoia. It's another way of defining it. What isn't? The opposite of dianoia. Opinion. And we want to behold that which is unopinable. That is the purpose to learning. The ones who truly love learning is for the sake of being. So we have learning, which we can recognize as dianoia, is directed towards the beings. And that when we get there, we are in the communion and company of the divine, we're communion with the divine company and of the pure and uniform. That's why we love learning, and that's why we practice doing it. That's the virtues: orderly and virile, sound-mindedness and courage, 2 of the 4 virtues. And we're following the logos and not giving up and imprisoning ourselves. That brings us into a state of calm. It affects us, it demonstrates us, and then we can always commune in this, the true and the divine, and behold the unopinable. So by definition, true philosophy and the goal of true learning is out of the reach of those who lack dianoia, because opinable is the realm of the physical. Opinions. Learning philosophy at school currently. Hopefully that'll change soon. Because it's a con. It's not a personal attack. It's not personal. It's not a person. But it's also a con in that studying philosophy, thinking that philosophy is opinion and not dianoia, will make you act against your own interests. Philosophers want to behold the true and the divine. They want to be able to follow the logos. They love learning. But their goal is by definition unopinable. It's like poor people voting for the conservatives who are trying to scam money from the poor people. It doesn't matter how much you pick it, or how much you vote for them, or how much you support them, or how much you buy their merchandise, or how much you donate. You literally cannot get what you want in that direction. It's limited. The whole thing is to trick poor people, to give them all the money. That's their goal. The propaganda appeals to those people so that they can get them to act in a way that's never going to work. It's never going to work. Same thing, philosophy. So that's talking about politics as a metaphor to talk about philosophy. Philosophy. If you think philosophy is opinions, personal opinions, my philosophy, your philosophy, Kant's philosophy, Hegel's philosophy, then you literally can't get what you really want. As a human being, as a living entity. Socrates says all things are the same. Let's talk about that. Same. Maybe same was the wrong word to look for. Okay, what I'm looking for is him saying, here we go, right here. All things are the same. Right. Now, we read 3 different translations. All things are the same in all physical things in that they reach out to be like the equal, the beautiful, the good, ousia. They reach out to being, even sticks. But all things want to be a certain real being, whether they pursue beauty or justice or truth or the good that they desire and love, knowledge that they want to understand with they love learning, or the truth and virtuous honor that they seek outward moving. They all want to be one of those real beings. But so that's a desire. But all things cannot because they have an inner deficiency by being physical. The physical can't join with the non-physical. You can have it as adjectives. You can be just or be good or be beautiful, but you can't be beauty itself. But also, he said, all things seek that, but all things have a purpose to remind us of that. So where is that? It is through all these perceptions are the same. Oh yes, here we go. The self-realization, the realization of self-being cannot be realized in any other way other than out of seeing or touching or sense perception. Thus I say all these perceptions are the same. Now the translation, other translation is all these things are the same. These sense perception things are the same. And all these beings are the same. So if you want to understand everything that exists in the physical world is the same, you can say every physical thing is the same, and that they all reach for real being, and they all have a purpose to help us realize self-realization. So that's important. If we get stuck in the physical world, in the level of opinion, in the modern idea of philosophy, then you literally can't get your goal. You can't vote for, you can't, screw for virginity. You can't vote for the Republicans hoping that they will help the poor. They can't. That's not their thing. You can't do opinion-based philosophy and really get what you seek. All things seek. And have a purpose to seek. So the purpose and the desire is to reach the real beings. And also, in doing that, you escape from human ills. So there's the purification from our problems and the perfection towards our highest goal. So, that's where we are so far in understanding philosophy. Now, we recognize that definition and demonstration are part of it, which means we defined logos dialectic towards being, but we should be demonstrating it. So let's do that now. Okay, let's try and demonstrate this. Well, we're reading the text, so let's demonstrate it to the text. What have we defined? Well, we just did it. We just defined philosophy. Well, let's demonstrate it. Okay, in the text, what's Socrates' philosophy? It seems to be dianoia. In fact, we have that great quote here, page 15. You approach towards each being with the self-dianoia without associating with your physical senses, and understanding dianoia without dragging along the perceptions with your logos. So there's your logos. But uses dianoia, one purifies oneself, liberates oneself as far as possible from the eyes and ears and the sum of the body. Without that, you can't acquire truth and mindfulness. And that allows us to go into a pure state where we can behold the self-realities and be lovers of mindfulness. Phronesis. So it's dianoia that awakens us to nous, to the apprehension of it. And that's a separation from the body as well. So, can we define Socrates' doctrine of philosophy so far? Well, yeah, let's use the one we just have. Self-logos through the dialectic directed towards being, we can call that dianoia. If we keep doing it, we have the virtues, so that when the dianoia awakens our nous, or the experience, or the separation of the soul from the body, or death, the practice of death, then we can get maybe upgrade our virtues to phronesis. And this is what we love, what we seek. Okay, now how is it demonstrated? Has Socrates demonstrated his philosophy? Well, we've got questions that have been asked. After giving the doctrine, after defining it, Simmias and Cebes said, hang on a second, what about the soul? That means the soul is immortal. Can you prove that? Can you demonstrate it? And he did. He gave us arguments as to why the soul must be immortal. The Enderman argument, the resources argument, and the cyclical nature of reality of the world argument. Also, Cebes demonstrated, gave us a fourth, the logos of learning as remembering. But in answering that question, he demonstrated his definition. In talking about the immortality of the soul, he used self-logos terms. He used the dialectical structure that we were able to pick out and figure out for ourselves. And he was talking about being the whole time. Then Simius says, "Oh, actually, I'm not familiar with this idea of learning as remembering. Can you lay that out for me?" And he did it. He answered his question. He helped him. But the whole time, he was using the self-logos terms in the dialectical structure directed towards being. Because that thing that we're remembering is being. That our soul once was. Therefore, we're immortal. Okay, then CB's like, "Oh, that's great, but I kind of feel like when we die, we're scattered to the wind. I recognize that's probably a childhood fear like the boogeyman. Can you sing me a song that gets rid of that fear?" And Socrates says, "By the way, if you're going to spend money on anything, spend money on someone who can sing that kind of a song. And keep singing it every day till you sing away those false beliefs." This is the idea of mythologizing our dialectics that we're making ourselves. So he did it. He answered his question, specific question to the person, to help him cooperatively, not as a debate, bro, not as a panel on stage, everyone just spewing their own opinions and then no one coming together and who cares, but one-to-one, collectively, step by step together, bringing them along, raising them up, persuading them, encouraging them, rationally, beautifully. The true model of benefit, the true model of art. And what did he do it with? The self-logos terms. What structure did he follow? The dialectic. What was he talking about the whole time? Being. Hey, the soul can't disperse if it's most like being. If it's more like the body, it's composite and can break down. But if it's pure and uniform like being, then it doesn't. So let's understand being and see if the soul's like that. So the whole time they were talking about being. So now we're on the next part. Socrates says, "Hey, I've done the same thing 4 times in a row in the definition and these 3 questions. My definition and my demonstrations, I was doing the same thing the whole time. Virtue is that, by the way." So he's exercising virtue. He's demonstrating what virtue is, not just defining it, but demonstrating virtue, which is good for us. Again, definition and demonstration. Doing the dialectic. In everything you do, in every argument, division. Drawing your attention back to being. Synthesis and analysis. He's living the dialectic. He's living dianoia. He's living philosophy. So he said, "Hey, by the way, we've done it 4 times. Let's do it again. Come on, surely you guys have something else to talk about, or you've got some problem, or you're not quite convinced." And they're like, "Well, we can't." "Yeah, of course, but it's your last day, Socrates. We don't want to, and it's sad. You're going to be dead tomorrow." So come on, man. I'm not sad. Think of the swans. They sing their most beautiful songs, talking about songs again, right before they're going to die, because they remember where they're going. They remember the good of the next place. And what else would I do before the sun sets? I've already told you this. There's nothing else to do. If I was doing anything else other than self-logos dialectic towards being, I wouldn't be having virtue. So encourage them. Hey, I'm like a swan. By the way, the swans are servants of Apollo, the god of music and philosophy. And his dreams were encouraging him to do both as well, weren't they? So we can see that dreams serve Apollo as well. They have foreknowledge of the goods in Hades, and they sing and rejoice on that day. So speak up. And by the way, this allows you the art of prophecy. So that's what we're doing now. We're prophesizing. We're using what we're learning about Apollo philosophy, definition, and demonstrating it by guessing that Simius will ask another question and Socrates will answer in a friendly, helpful way, the dialectic that will benefit him. And in doing it, he will at the same time be using the self-logos terms through the structure of the dialectic towards being. That's our prophecy. That's where we're at. And that's where we're going to jump into now. So jumping into where we left off last time, Socrates. So yeah, our prophecy is he's going to answer a question, but he's going to do it to draw the information out through asking and answering questions. So he's not going to give Simmias the answer. He's going to ask him questions to draw it out of him. And that's going to benefit him. He's going to raise to a level of understanding from his false belief. But the whole time he's going to be using self-logos terms in a dialectic structure about being, because that's what he's done in the last 4 sections. So what we're doing is dividing the text up into its divisions. His doctrine, the question about whether or not the soul is immortal, the question about whether or not the learning is remembering, and then the question about whether the soul scatters upon death. So he says, hey, surely we can do it again. We keep repeating it, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And well, we didn't want to ask you because we didn't want to bother you. But come on. I'm like a swan that sings its beautiful song, happy about its death, because it has foreknowledge of the good in the afterlife. So it sings and rejoices on that day. I possess that art of prophecy because I'm dedicated to the god Apollo myself. So please, let's keep talking. And let's keep reading. Simmias says, well spoken as far as I'm concerned, and I will tell you of my puzzle. And Cebes here in turn will tell you that which he does not accept concerning what has been said. For I believe, Socrates, just as perhaps you do also, that on the one hand, to know clearly about those subjects is impossible, or at least something very difficult to do in our present life. Yet in turn, it is an altogether slack individual who neither tests in every way what has been said, and who does not persevere until one should be exhausted from studying selves from every possible angle. Sound familiar? How often are we told this? We can't know these things about what happens when you die, what the soul is, what is truth. It's impossible. A very common belief in our age. Or at least it's very difficult, but we don't want to be slack. We have to test in every possible way. So at least he's there. At least he's going to test it. At least he's going to play the game and see if it works. For he must necessarily indeed achieve one of these things about selves, to either learn in some way what selves possess or discover what selves are, and if that is indeed impossible, to take hold of the best and most irrefutable of human doctrines, and by being borne upon this, just as if upon a raft, sailing through the dangers of life, unless if someone should be able to carry us across safer and less dangerously upon a firmer vessel, as if upon a certain divine logos, as if upon a divine logos. As if. So even now, since you also said what you have said, I at least shall feel no shame to ask questions, nor will I blame myself in later times that presently I did not say what I believe. For when I examine what has been said, O Socrates, in reference to myself and to the following, it does not appear to be said altogether in a sufficient way. Oh, you've got the end in the chat. I know what he says in the end, by the way. Right, so very familiar sort of stuff here. We're often told it's, of course, the word selves we've already defined as the aspects of being that have a common head, self-ousia, self-beauty, self-justice, all the things we're after. They're either unknowable, but he said we don't want to be slack. We have to at least try to know them. So we're either going to end up with one of two things. Know them ourselves, achieve this, learn and possess them ourselves, or take hold of the best human doctrine which sounds more like, I guess, what you might do at college. What's the best human doctrine? Why? Because it's like someone has a firmer vessel. We're going to sail better through life if we follow Kant's advice. That kind of thing. But I'm not going to speak up, and later when I think back about asking these questions, I'm not going to hate on myself for annoying Socrates on his last day because of what you said. So, because what you have said has not been sufficient. Here is our key word again. One of our questions we've been carrying with us is, what should change our mind? If we have integrity as thinkers, as philosophers, as humans, then we need to recognize, hey, some people are ignorant and don't change their minds. We don't want to be that way, but we don't want to be conned. So what is the metric? What is the paradigm for what should change our mind? We're learning that there's a kind of question and answer structure where you're brought along, you're not being intimidated or slandered or abused. It's friendly, it's encouraging, but at the end of the dialectic, the conclusion has to work in some way. It has to change your mind. We've still got that question, what should change our mind at the end of it? And whether or not it's sufficient. That's the word that keeps coming up. If it's not sufficient, if it didn't work, if you still have that false belief, if you still don't accept this truth, then it's not sufficient. So he's saying, hey, you've said it 4 times in 4 different ways, and it's well said, but in reference to myself, it's not sufficient. Socrates replies, you have equally brought the truth to light, O companion, but tell me, in what way was it not sufficient? So we recognize this as well. Before we start, we can ask the 2 questions. Where you at or where you're stuck? In what way are you stuck? How far did you go? Where were you at and where are you stuck? Because that's going to direct our questions. Notice, it's 2-person game. You don't just throw opinions at people. And maybe I didn't do very well in the chat. I was kind of giving a general overview. I could have been more specific. Hey, had a question in the chat about the soul. I could have been, okay, where are you at? And in what way do you not accept the soul as immortal? And then let's have a back and forth conversation of the dialectic together, following the logos to the truth. Both of us benefiting. But we're learning. And that's why we're reading. So in what way was it not sufficient? Where should we go? Where should we start? Simmias replies, surely in this way to me at least. One might also use the same logos about harmony and a lyre. A lyre is that instrument up here. And its strings. And on the one hand, say that the harmony is something invisible and incorporeal and quite beautiful and is something divine that resides in a well-tuned lyre. So all of these descriptions we're seeing about the soul that makes it more like being. So the argument that we just had, does our soul scatter to the wind? And Socrates says, well, if it's composite, if it's made of parts, then it can decay like the body, like clothes, like shoes, like physical things. They're made up of different things. But if it's like the divine and it's singular, then it can't. So which is it more like? And then we had some reasoning. We saw that the soul isn't like the body because it's not visible like the body is. It's incorporeal and it has a higher level of beauty resembling the divine. Therefore, it's unlikely that the soul would scatter to the wind. But he's saying, hang on a second, you can use those same adjectives to talk about a harmony that exists in a lyre, in a guitar. Whereas the self-lyre and her strings are physical and corporeal and composite and earthly and are akin to the mortal. So here he is saying, yep, it's more like the body, even though it creates a harmony. Then if someone were to either break the lyre or cut and break the strings, and if one were to rely on the same logos that you've just given us, and that harmony must still exist and is not destroyed, it is in no way possible for the lyre and the strings which are mortal to exist when the strings are broken, whereas the harmony that is akin and of the same nature and of the divine and the immortal should perish before that which is mortal. Whereas this person would say that the self-harmony must necessarily still exist in some way, and especially that the wood and the strings must rot away before anything can happen to that. Poor old Simius is getting slandered in the chat. Right, so he's saying, hey, we said, hey, the soul is more like these things and therefore must exist when the body decays, but doesn't happen with a guitar or a lyre. Because when you can play a guitar and you hear the beautiful harmony, which is beautiful, you can't see it, but you can hear it, right? It's not composite of different things. But if the wood and the strings rot like the body rots, then the first thing to go would be the harmony. The last thing to go would be the body. So the first thing to rot away would be our soul. So we can recognize this, by the way. There's a name for it, I think. A way of thinking that the soul, I think it's called reductionism. It's just a byproduct of the physical world. There's no actual soul. Just if you have the body organized, the physical body makes a soul. So the soul is the first thing to go, and then the body decays. Socrates, I at least also imagine that yourself has this in mind, that we really do understand, that accept that the soul is something like this. So far as just our body is stretched and held together by the hot and the cold, the dry and the wet, and other such things, so also is our soul a harmonic mixture of these elements, selves, mixed together with each other rightly and in due measure. So there it is. He laid it out for us. So you can see he's pulling in. Make some space here. So he's pulling in the principle. So he recognizes that there is a certain kind of logos of the physical world, physical realm logos, which is a back and forth of opposites. So we're not contending about that. We're opposites. We can recognize pleasure and pain. He mentioned oh, thank you very much. Emergentism is one position of how consciousness comes about. Right, very nice, thank you. So his position has a name. Thank you for that. It's important to put names on things. Emergentism. Emergent. Poorly draw it again. Emergentism. It emerges from these physical things. So he points out, by the way, yeah, I'm accepting this as a back and forth of hot and cold. Hot and cold. Dry and wet. But you know what? This kind of logos of the physical world is like, so he's using analogy, so it's still like pretty good. He's using likeness, he's using analogy to think and talk. We use analogy to think. That's pretty good. It's like a strings of a lyre. So let's keep this color. So stretched like strings of a lyre. So he's using that same metaphor. Wet is something that is emergent, funnily enough. How many water molecules do you need to produce something wet? Oh, that's interesting. How many? What's the punchline? Right, so this principle of emergentism might apply to wetness. Certain amount of molecules to create the conditions for wetness. But it might not apply to the soul. So it's stretched, and our body is stretched and held together. Like the hot and the cold, the moist and the dry. So also, this is the other side of the analogy. So also, soul is a harmonic mixture of these elemental selves mixed together in right and due measure. The soul happens to have a certain harmony. And it is clear that when our body is slackened or stretched beyond measure by diseases and other defects, the soul, on the one hand, must be immediately destroyed, even if she is most divine, just as the other harmonies are also seen or heard in sounds and in the works of artists. But on the other hand, the remains of each body will remain for a long time until they should either be burnt or rot away completely. So he's saying, hey, well, if you hurt the body, the body gets stretched beyond measure, diseases and defects, get hit in the head, it'll affect your soul. Get brain damage and your soul will be affected. And the body will still remain, even though, and by the way, the soul seems to leave the body first. So it takes a while for the body to rot away. So it seems to be, this analogy seems to be more apt. In the chat, consciousness, we are still stuck trying to figure out what we mean by consciousness. So yes, consciousness is the acceptable terminology we can use in modern science and stuff. It's okay, but what is consciousness? Oh, no, don't ask that question. That's what we're after. What is the nature? Hey, by the way, consciousness sounds like an adjective. What's the noun? What is conscious itself or mind itself? Ask that in a science class and see how mad the teacher gets. So if we apply the same logos, if anyone should worthily claim by soul being a mixture of these elements of the body, she will be the first to perish in what we call death. Hey, the soul dies first. Just like the harmony you hear in your guitar finishes first before the whole guitar rots away. It is a noun. Consciousness is a noun. Usually ness means noun, but the way it's used, it's kind of making a noun, but still kind of staying in the realm of adjectives. Consciousness. You're right, the word ness does make it a noun. Beautiness. But it's like that in between. Conscious is adjectives. Beauty is, right, so beautiful would be the adjective. Beautiness would be the noun. But it's kind of an in-between between beauty itself. Beautiness could just be a concept kind of thing. Consciousness. Blackness. English is dumb. We need to rediscover the Greek. Phaedo is narrating. When Socrates looked keenly, at us, just as often was his habit, he smiled and said, "Of course, Simmias speaks justly. If then one of us is more resourceful than I am, why not answer him? For he seems to have handled the logos not in a thoughtless way." Notice he's inviting others to play. Can anybody else? He seems to have some intelligence behind his... Yeah, good point. English is a bastardized language, absolutely. And we're seeing why. Specifically, there are certain key words in the Greek that we lack in language, in English, like ousia, like nous, like dianoia, that prevent us from doing our job. The true practice of philosophy and our purpose here to do before we die, according to Socrates. And of course, the Latin tradition, taking away the word the. So it's difficult for us to talk about in some languages like Latin, what is the beautiful? So he's inviting others to play. However, it seems necessary to me at first, we should still listen to the objections of Cebes before, in order that, following that, we may in turn have time to call in the Logos to answer in some way. Should we so wish. So he's saying, hey, let's buy us a little bit of time to call in the Logos. That's interesting. So let's keep this objection in mind, the lyre analogy, and also get Cebes to give his objections too, so we have some time to call the Logos in. Notice, reflects what he said earlier. Socrates was watching the Logos unfold. After he gave that thing, Socrates appeared to be looking at the Logos self had spoken. This is a thing that Socrates does. He often says, I'm not wise. They was like, what are you talking about? You're clearly the wisest of all people. But here, the self had spoken the Logos. He was watching. This really adds some clues and questions about what is this state of phronesis. If we go from a lover of learning, where's our triad? If we go from a lover of learning and realize that learning requires asking this question of being, therefore we go from a lover of learning, we can still be in the soul, lover of learning, because we have that learning part of the soul. We're not interested in money, we're not a finance bro, we're not interested in fame, we're not an Instagram-like person, but we're interested in learning. We can get into the game. Then we realize that what we learn about requires certain causes, oneness itself, consciousness itself, justice itself, beauty itself. For us to even learn, then we can get into philosophy, because the study of that realm of being is wisdom, the virtue of wisdom. Then when we have that initiation and we get there, we become a lover of phronesis, or we desire phronesis and we gain that state of phronesis. That's the triad of learning. And he talked about that being a state of self. Let's find that state. Here we go. When we pass into that realm that is pure, eternal, deathless, add those adjectives to your dialectic, and remain in the same way, always akin with self, she also becomes that. When she arises into self, according to self, and goes out. Self both ceases from the wandering, being drunk, wanders about, dizzy and confused, being dragged by the body in our sense perceptions. You cease from that wandering, and you always remain according to the same, in the same way, about those beings, insofar as she remains in contact with the beings. This state of self is called phronesis. Translator uses the word mindfulness, but I stick with phronesis. So, if Socrates is in that state, and we think that he is because he says he's happy about where he's going, and you're only happy when you've done your work and you've been initiated, then we have a question. What's it like to be in that stage of enlightenment, that level of being? He's looking at the self, looking at the logos that the self had spoken. He's happy to keep risking it. Hey, ask again. Let's do it again. And if you can find a way of talking, take me. So there's no pride or ego. He's kind of watching the logos wherever it comes from, so long as it's from self. He's like follows the god of Apollo. His master is the god of music and philosophy. And he says he invites others to play. Okay. He can judge the logos. So here we have a judgment. He's able to judge how well. So these are our questions. How far are you on the ladder? Well, I've judged him to handle the logos in a not thoughtless way. But we should listen to the objection of Cebes in order that we may have time to call in the logos. So that state of enlightenment requires calling in the logos, which is curious. Call in the logos. So listen to the objections of Cebes before in order that we can call in the logos and answer in some way should we so wish. But when we have heard them, we should either agree with selves if anyone believes them to be harmonious, but if not, we should proceed thus the advocate of the logos. Come then, Cebes, tell us in turn, what is troubling you? So we have the first objection. What is troubling you? So again, so where you stuck? Where you stuck or where you at? So we either agree, thumbs up, with whatever Cebes says, we should agree with it if it's harmonious. Interesting too, he's using the same words. Harmonious was the key word of Simius's objection. It's another part of the logos. You pick up the key words, look for the self logos in the other person. Oh, this was the word that you're talking about. I'm going to use it now. I'm going to reflect it back. We're together. We're using a similar language. Hey, if we will agree with Cebes if we find his words to be harmonious. But if not, we shall be an advocate of the logos. So we will this somehow calling in the logos, somehow watching the logos, somehow being an advocate for the logos. So this could go under your dialectic of the logos. Logos is key. It's one of the three big things. Logos, dialectic, directed towards being. So we could do a dialectic on the logos. So if we would, which of course we want to, because we want to master the logos. Dialectic, goodness, my handwriting. Dialectic on logos. On the A side, if it is, self to self, what can you say about it? How does it function? How do those affected by the functioning relate to each other? And then how do they relate back to the subject? Advocate. Advocate. Maybe it's here. How does Socrates relate to the logos? He's an advocate. He watches the logos from self, even if he's the one speaking. He, what else do we say that he does? He judges the logos. How well was Simius's logos? He encourages objections, encourages more logos. He invites others. So this is others to others. How does other would be Socrates. So S is logos, of course. How does the logos affect Socrates? How does Socrates relate to his friends? He encourages. He invites them to play. This is to play. Does anybody else want to lead the logos, lead the discussion? So this would be our dialectic on logos. So all the way through the text, you'll find Socrates is giving us material to fill out all 4 categories on various different things. Of course, we want to also get what the logos is itself and how does it relate to Socrates. Here we've got how Socrates relates back. He watches, he judges, he's an advocate for the logos, he encourages the logos, he gives time for the logos to unfold. Time. What was the actual... So we also, the significance of reading the text is we get nail it down exactly what's in the text. Call in the logos. Time to call in the logos. So these are some notes we're going to keep. Maybe later we'll go back when we finish the text and pull our notes together, weave them together with the sewing needle of infinite truths, the snit, weave them together and make a final dialectic on the logos. Of course, it's not final, of course. In simply doing the dialectic on the logos, we would have learned more, giving us the material to do another one, because it's a conversation. The conversation keeps on happening. And you can keep this conversation happening in the Discord, in the comments below. You can join me on Twitch. And of course, Socrates is keeping the conversation going all the way to his last breath. We are being like Socrates. And if Socrates is like the good daemon, allowing him to be confident in where he's going, then we are going to be like the good daemon because of that axiom we mentioned earlier. If A is equal to B and C is equal to B, then A is equal to C. If Socrates is equal to the good daemon, let's do it this way. If Socrates is equal to the good daemon and we are equal to Socrates, then therefore we would be becoming equal to the good daemon, which is what we want to do. So that's where we are at the text. Next time we're going to jump into what CB's objection is, and we're taking a break to give us time to let the logos in. What logos would you have in response to Simmias's liar argument? His objection to the soul being more immortal, therefore not composite, therefore won't scatter. But what about harmony? Yeah, share your question. What about harmony? Do you have an objection? Share them in the comments. Or do you have time to let the logos in and how you would respond to Simmias? So, there's a bit of a teaser for next week. We're going to see what CB's objection is. We're going to see what the logos that came in is going to be like. We're going to see how Socrates responds. Is he shaken? Could this be his undoing moments before his death? Or does his level of enlightenment, his level of phronesis, allow him to completely trust in the logos, no matter who it comes from, no matter what objection, no matter whether he's in this life or the next? Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you next time. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff.